Welcome to this conversation on narrative change and youth justice. I'm Phyllis Becker, Senior Fellow with the Full Frame Initiative, and I'm joined by Gladys Carrión with Catalyze Justice and YCLJ, Youth Correctional Leaders for Justice, and Henry Ramos with the New Schools Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy. It's truly my pleasure to have this conversation with the both of you. Welcome.
Thank you, Phyllis.
You're welcome. As you all know, that we really can't build a country where everyone has a fair shot at well-being without seeing our young people and families in the context of their communities and in the full frames of their lives. And to do that, we also need to change the narrative about youth, particularly youth that are impacted by the justice system, perceptions of youth crime, and young people of color. Henry, I know in our op-ed, More Policing Won't Solve Youth Crime, we talk about how the data doesn't really match and often doesn't match the rhetoric and the narratives we see in the media and political sphere. And Gladys, I know you are doing tremendous work with systems leaders to actively change the narrative to do systems transformation work. So let's dig a little deeper into narrative change and the youth justice system. So Henry, why is it important to challenge this pervasive narrative about youth crime?
Well, Phyllis, let me just extend my gratitude to you and the Full Frame Institute and extend a greeting to Gladys. It's such a pleasure and honor to be in your company and to be in such a timely and important conversation. I think that we would probably almost to a person in our networks agree that, when we watch the news or hear stories about youth and youth crime, particularly as it pertains to youth of color, it's always extremely sensationalized and not very favorable. And I think that the reason why we need to change that narrative is because in its operationalization in our culture and our systems, it has the tendency to kind of justify denying rights and opportunities to young people, particularly young people of color. And it justifies, divesting from very key areas that would be helpful to their full development and education and training and the arts and other sort of more value proposition-driven investments, and essentially directing resources to very punitive systems in the youth and adult criminal justice space. And I think that really produces both tremendous unfairness, but also social problems that really kind of begin to build on themselves. So I think changing the narrative at its heart is an essential starting point for really getting more right about what the data actually tell us is happening, and more right about what we need to do to reinvest in our communities, particularly our youth of color, and not invest in areas that are so counterproductive to their well-being, their health, and their asset sharing with the rest of us.
Thank you, Henry. Gladys, what would you like to add to that?
I think these very negative and punitive narratives really justify dehumanizing our young people, not investing in our young people, not investing in our communities. It justifies, as Henry says, the fear-based policy making. It really drives disinvestments in communities, and it defies what the research tells us that works, what we understand works best for young people, and it really is about appealing to a perception that really, I think, is undergirded by racism, right? It really justifies the worst about human nature. And I think that the media sensationalizes this. And so from a perspective of a system leader, right, of running a youth justice system, and I use the word justice very loosely here, right? It really promotes the use, this language, this very punitive, negative stereotyping of our young people to justify punitive responses to actions by young people, right? And mistakes that young people make. And it's not grounded, what is maddening about all of this as I speak to and look at different jurisdictions, it's that it's not based on the research, it's not based on the data, it's not based on the facts, right? And we use this false narrative to justify doing what doesn't work, what is wrong for young people. And that's really, it is disconcerting, but it is so harmful. It is, and it justifies backtracking, right? Really undoing the good work that has been done now for quite a few years to right-size the system, to decarcerate, to invest in communities. We have a justification now with this really negative narrative to say, this is the way to do it. And I think we have to push back all the time.
So Gladys, kind of, building on that, how are you and your colleagues doing the work of shifting the narrative to bring about systemic change? And then Henry, if you could follow up on that as well.
I think it's really hard work. And I think that what we've started to focus on is really creating partnerships with the media, for instance. And we're exploring how do we work with the progressive media to help inform their reporting, to help with interpreting, right, and being a resource for the facts, right, as they write, these articles and the reporting. How do we work better with the media and with in the media, in television, the social media? How do we work with them as partners to help inform their perspective and really attack and challenge these narratives that really portray our young people really as predators and going back? And so I think that's really important. It takes a very long time to change perceptions and really working to really be very vigilant about getting the facts out, getting the right information, and continuing to do that in a very concerted way, and looking at who else is doing this work and how can we partner to leverage each other's voice and work.
Thank you, Gladys. Henry.
Yeah, I love what Gladys said, and I would echo it. And I would just say for our part in our work at the Institute on Race, Power, and Political Economy, we address the imbalance in a couple of ways. One is to really kind of lift up the overemphasis in our culture and in our reporting on individual circumstances, individual rights, and other frameworks that relate to the agency of the individual, the choices of the individual, because that becomes very much an easy play to talk about morality and people who are deserving and undeserving. We focus instead on systems that have a very impersonal effect, but a very decided bias on how particular groups of people are treated within our systems. So people of color, poor people, people that maybe talk about or think about the world in non-conventional ways are easy targets for people to single out as troublemakers, or people that are not worthy of the benefits that the rest of us, think we're entitled to in our public and private systems. So we're definitely about trying to attack the analysis that is so rooted in American culture that kind of really roots the individual as the center of gravity. And we talk much more about systems and their imperfections and their biases. Also, as economists and people that think about, cost benefit, we're very focused on the idea that it's truly penny wise and pound foolish to promote policies like we see that essentially treat Black and brown kids as throwaways. It costs as much to send a kid to Harvard as it does to incarcerate them. And the clear tracks that people in those two, realities are taking in terms of their social and economic product are in opposite. They're quite different. If you start early in a young child's life and you criminalize them and put them in a cage, and then take away their voting rights and their economic empowerment, you're not only, denying society the incredible benefits of the remarkable inherent talent that every individual has, you're actually hurting their families, you're really destroying their communities, and you are foregoing the opportunity to have the other side of the equation, which is all of the incredible asset building that would come with really lifting up their inherent vision, talent, skill, humanity. So we talk a lot about the economic trade-offs that come with taking the pejorative course that we've too often taken over the past decades.
Yeah, thank you. And we often talk in the well-being blueprint community about fixing systems and looking at what is contributing to folks' problems versus focusing on that individual, that very narrow view. So appreciate you both speaking to that. Well, we know there's a lot of work to still be done. What's one thing you think that people can do to support the systemic and narrative changes that are needed? And Henry, could you start us off on that?
Well, I mean, I think we all, as citizens or people that are members of our society, have a responsibility to educate and inform ourselves in the best way that we can about what's really going on, not just to kind of absorb sensational reporting or biased reporting and to take it at face value. You know, we have to have a much more mature frame, a much more discerning frame of how we absorb information and how we use it. And then coupled with that, as we become educated and informed, we need to activate, we need to become engaged directly and involved and to use our voice and unapologetically speak out on injustices that are very clearly affecting our communities. And I think that the more we do that and the more we harness and unite our organizing efforts so that they're not just singular or you know, one issue approaches, the more likely we are to build what is most foundational important in a democracy, and that is power. We need to build and utilize our power to get different outcomes in the system that we know is not working for us and not designed to work for us.
Okay, thank you. And Gladys, what do you think?
Oh, I have to echo everything that Henry has said. And I want to focus on leaders, you know, leaders in systems who I think, and leaders in any position, we hold privileged positions. And we really then bear a larger responsibility to be visible about challenging these really negative narratives and the attempts to dehumanize our young people. I think it's really very important that as a leader, you acknowledge that, you call that out, and you work to get the right information out into the community, to really disseminate the data, what's working and what's not working, and really allow the community to have a voice in this, have young people, and organize. You know, I think about what made transformation possible in New York, and it was really building a movement and really speaking to who these young people were, and that we can't give up on them, that we can't afford as a society to give up on them. And so leaders in whatever sector, whether you're a PTA leader, whether you are a system leader, whether you're an academic, you have a responsibility to speak out and join with others to call that out at every instance.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for your important work that you and your colleagues are doing to shift the narrative to support the well-being of young people and their families and the communities they live in.
Thank you, Phyllis, for the work that you do every day to make a
Thank you.
difference.